Hello, Faelonians. I'm Lore Master Matt,
And I'm Faelon Jon.
and welcome to the Bellringers. From time to time, we're going to record a series on a special topic, and you'll find that in these sessions, the Bellringers. The Lord Mayor of Teradim, Varain Qualtara, employs many young people, generally waifs and strays like Jon and I, to roam throughout Teradim, ringing a bell and shouting proclamations from the Lord Mayor or the news of the day. Besides a daily stipend, Bellringers are often stopped on the streets by the affluent of Teradim and asked to give the news to them personally, for which they receive a copper or two for their time. We are your Bellringers, and today the news is a starting point for lore and your journey through the world of Faelon. Welcome back to the Bellringers. This is the World of Faelon introduction. This is the second part. Last week we left off with magic in the world of Faelon, what it was, how it was sundered at the end of a nasty war between the Gaul. And today we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we want to talk a little bit about the world, the geography of the world. So Faelon's a big place. Faelon's a big planet, and we only know a little bit of it. So what areas of Faelon do we know about so far?
Well, we have a map.
We do.
Yes. And so the map shows a continent and part of another continent, about a third of the other continent. And just from a practical standpoint, the map is available on a digital copy.
Yeah.
World Anvil. I know World Anvil's gotten tougher to use. We are working on a plan to move away from that platform.
We are.
If you're having trouble getting to it, let us know. We'll help you,
Sure.
Connect. So that map shows the part of Faelon that we've been telling our stories about so far. The northern continent of Visartiel, which is basically Northland in Faelon.
It's exactly what it is.
It's not complicated, folks. And then Rishiel, Southland, the second continent, the southern continent, is where the Trazrite Empire has mostly control of it.
From day to day.
Day to day, yeah. On any given day. And about a third of that continent is shown. We know from a sketch basis what the rest of the southern continent looks like.
Yeah.
But we do not present that anywhere publicly.
We haven't. Okay. We've written some things about it. We've talked a little bit about it, but there's no map for it yet.
Yeah, there's a practical challenge. So we're not going to go into the practical challenge. We are going to get that mapped out and share it.
Yeah.
As soon as it becomes possible. Start telling stories about it.
Yes.
In more detail. That's where the Azura are. It's where Skyfire is. It's where the Ischaki are. It's where the great Central Plateau is. Lots of stories to be told there. That's the Trazrite Empire and its subject kingdoms. And there's these places we refer to. And you see that reflected in the dress of some of the Trazrite and Eclipse models that are from different parts of the southern continent are garbed differently.
They're clearly a different culture behind them.
Different cultures. Because it's an empire, and there's a core imperial portion of it, and then there's these provinces that are subject to them.
Some of them are friendly, and some of them aren't.
Less so, yes. So, but if you just, if you're a geek for this sort of thing, you start measuring, the continents across, and roughly that Faelon is a world sort of the same size as Earth as a planet.
Yeah,
there's plenty of room to play.
Lots and lots of room.
So those are the two parts that are known well. We've done so much work with all the background. We have not yet covered even some of the factions, the nations that appear on the map.
Right.
Let alone get to all the ones.
The northern continent still has some blank spots.
It does. In terms of coverage of models.
Right.
Semidia is noted there, and Thormanol, the two big ones. But we're getting there.
We are. We're chewing along.
Yeah. And you have previews of some of those cultures and a handful of the models.
Yeah.
And some of the articles we've written for the background.
And a few of the patrons.
Right. Patrons are from some of these places,
are wondering allies.
So as we move away from World Anvil, it'll be easier to show. And once we get our cartography sorted out, we'll be able to show you maps of these regions. As far as off the map and not part of these two continents, there are other places in Faelon that people, cultures exist and people live. Two notable ones. There is the place that Michelle fled.
Right.
right? If you know your background at all, you know that Rochelle came to the southern continent from somewhere else.
They're refugees.
Yeah, colony ships. And
Yeah.
where'd they come from, and why were they running, and what were they running from?
As well honed as they are. What
would send them away?
Driven them off, you know?
Yeah, something awful. So we'll be telling that story down the road.
Very much looking forward to that story.
And then if you know if you've been through World Amble and you looked at some of the history and some of the timelines, you'll see that the Western nations send an expeditionary fleet out in the Western Ocean that does not come back. Where'd they go? Why haven't they returned? And we're going to tell that story.
What kind of fate did they meet?
Yeah, good, bad, indifferent. Find something better? Paradise full of gold.
Right. Fountains of youth.
And then come back with ships that are all a colony ships full of children from discovering the fountain of youth. So we're not going to get. We don't want to tease you too much. We got a lot of things to do before we get to those two regions, and that's not even all of the geography there is beyond that. There's plenty more space to play. So,
and that was something that I'm sure that you did on purpose. You know, you're telling this core story, but there needed to be room to expand and to play.
And also prophetically teammates to play.
Right.
Having done so much of the initial stuff as part of the world I developed when I was a kid. I got friends on the team now that need to have creative spaces to play. Remind me to tell you one more time to keep your hands off Falcar, Matt.
What did I do with Falcar?
Arlene.
Again, yes. That will never go away.
No, it will not go away. Mostly because it's awesome. Okay. If it sucked, I could just erase it.
Right. Yeah, be done with it.
Yeah. Side joke, folks. So we're moving on. And not a joke. It's very, very serious. So I can't even do it with a straight face. But the core idea was that there were going to be some cultures that were broad-based that produced multiple nations and some niche cultures.
Right.
Maybe because they were a different species or a subset of humanity. Although really that's that's a trope because we're all the same person.
Sure.
We're different because of UV light and climate, so we're overstating that in our own world. But it's a thing from high fantasy.
Yeah.
And so we'd like to have that be different for reasons.
Right. And I think we've done a really good job of that.
I think so.
In the areas that we've done so far.
Yeah, and we've done a really good job of overcoming my, 17-year-old late 70s view of things, and gotten that kind of modernized. That was holding it back a little bit. We needed to break free. So I appreciate your patience.
We do what we can.
We do what we can.
Which reminds me, and this is embarrassing about leaving a group of people off here.
But the idea was to take the big, as a student of history, an amateur historian, the interesting places are the fault lines, the places where cultures clash.
That's right.
Right. So the main theme of Faelon was to bring these three large cultures that had multiple nations per them, weren't niches, and migrate them into the same spot for different reasons.
Right.
So the Faelors start in northwestern Asartiel, and the Simkers start all the way on the eastern end of Asartiel, and the Chalers start at the bottom end, the southern end of the southern continent of Risha.
Right.
And they move north, and the Faelors move south and east, and the Simker peoples move east, and they all meet in Thormanol.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
And the northern part of the southern continent. And of course, we introduced things like the Trillians or somebody different.
Yes.
Why are they different?
Very different.
Why are they there? The Mershale, it disrupt that to some degree.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a province of the empire at one point.
Yeah.
And the deal was made during the rebellion to give them that land. And then, of course, the Transvites wanted to renege, and then Mershale said, nope.
Yeah.
So they're still there. They're carrying on their Mershale things.
Mershale things.
Yeah. So the stories behind these different peoples, so when I say niche cultures, that's not meant to be pejorative. They're just not grand migratory, multi-nation ancestries, like the Faelors, the Simkers, and the Chalers.
Right.
So you have Azura, have their own story. The Chakram have their own story. The Trillions have their own story. The Rochelle come in here from somewhere else. And we're going to have others that aren't on these two continents
Doing the same thing.
entering this space for different reasons.
Right.
Are the Rochelle being chased? What sent them over here? If it was tectonic, maybe there's nobody back there chasing them. If they left because they didn't like what was happening to them, there's somebody behind
there's something else back
there.
Yeah,
which is more interesting. So it's true.
Far more interesting.
so that's what that was driving that the peoples, and so and to have them be culturally distinct enough to have it matter, but not so outrageously that they weren't obviously from the same stock.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the things that draws me into it. Even back at the beginning, when I first came into contact with you guys, was the way that you've done these factions that were clearly groups of the same kind of people that had split off and formed their own cultures, and they were clashing with their own kind, and they were clashing with people from different cultures, and it was very tidy and it was very neat, and everybody kind of had their own little place, and I thought that was brilliant. And it, in a lot of high fantasy, it's very heavy-handed, and this is subtle, and it's
subtle until we start talking about religion. So, one of the things, this is also a bias from my amateur historian nature. You look at some of these, and it turned out to be professional. Eventually I would, go into a world where this mattered to my day-to-day job.
Right.
But this whole thing started well before then. You have more instances than I can count of cultures clashing that are the same people with different religions.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They're from the same place. They are genetically derived from the same spot.
Yeah.
And they are just beating the crap out of each other, not getting along, or having other issues because they chose two different paths.
Right.
From how to, tie into the spiritual.
Right.
And that had to be to me,
that had to be in there. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Other high fantasies ignore it. Other high fantasies have it be, the gods are good and the demons are not, the devils are not. It wasn't that simple for me. I wanted to make that part of the fabric of it and not a throwaway.
Well, it tends to be not that simple in reality. So I think
or whatever passes for reality. You and I are going into that. So there's that. That's why that turned out the way it did.
Very good. All right, so we have these different peoples, but we also have monsters in Faelon. We have these creatures that kind of
not enough monsters.
Right. Now
we're going to talk about that, right?
We are. Yeah. We talked last week a little bit about man is monster enough,
right?
And how we didn't want monsters everywhere and being the town mayor and blah blah blah. But there are monsters, identifiable monsters in Faelon, ones that are rather famous. The podcast, the Sleeping Grush. The Grush is obviously one of those monsters. So tell us a little bit about those monsters and how.
So that we did talk about before. We have a situation where I reacted negatively when I was writing the original story, the original background to of course I was part of the generation of I'm the 40th level down the dungeon and I kick a door open and there's a thing.
Right. Living.
It makes no sense
in the
that it's there. Yeah. Right. It's in a dark room with no ecosystem, no support structure, no food,
Right.
Food sources, whatever. Except me, now
and it's really hungry.
So I must be a lot of adventurers traipsing in here, So you had to pile of bones, like that, whatever. Or you could have them all eat fungus,
Right.
So I wanted that. Really was desperate to have that make more sense. And with making something make sense in high fantasy is kind of crazy, But the more the world is relatable, the more stark you can make the difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's the going theory. So if you have these creatures, what role would they play? They're not going to run around town. There's not going to be communities of them. They're not going to be sitting in the 40th level of a dungeon for 6 years, hibernating until an adventurer kicks the door in and then do a thing. So where are they going to fit? Well, they're going to be in the wilderness spaces.
Yeah.
And how wild are they going to be? How crazily strange are they going to be? I wanted to up that as time went on. So we had a situation where you have the creature in the woods, that eats your livestock, and you have to go out and put it down.
Right.
Now that can be boring to some people. I've done that already. I want to go to the astral plane and fight gods. Okay, we're going to take some steps in between.
We're going to go there.
All we're going to do is take some steps in between.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying is. So we are to the point now where enough of the story has been told. It's time to start introducing some more of these things. We also have the world of Faelon, a mirror world where the rules that apply in Faelon don't work the same way. And there are creatures we find, because these people on Faelon look like us, you and me, Matt, right?
Yeah.
Somewhat like Jaeger.
Well, the ones in Faelon maybe a little more.
So, right, Jaeger-like. We're beating a producer who could just hit the button and kill this whole thing in 1 second. So why he's humoring us, I don't know. So we have that space to bring these creatures in and have the bizarre, right? And that's one source of them. So we're going to do more of that. We're going to visit more of the wilderness spaces.
Yeah.
We have the whole area of the southern continent playing with dinosaur-like creatures.
Right.
We just need to get more of these out there. So more of the model spaces in our production schedule are geared towards let's get some more of these things in front of the players.
Things that are adventure related, right? We call them bright sword models sometimes on the list, because you'll see them a lot more in bright sword games, but we're moving them into the free blade spaces too.
Yes, yeah. So it's going to be more of those things entering the game, and they'll be wilder, stranger than the things that have come before, because it's time to up that in. We'll find them in the same places. They still won't be mayors of towns. It might be in Faelon.
Thank you.
There's a forest somewhere with a Cariad mayor. I think that'd be cool.
Where's a little top hat?
And a gavel. It's not bad. Yeah. A monocle.
Right.
So, I say this street needs cleaning. So, but we have that room to play, and now it's time to bring that out, and showcase it. And so we haven't spent as much time in those wilderness spaces either. The adventures have been still near in the civilization. We need to push that out with the club scenarios also. Right. So some people do.
All right. Folks, thank you for tuning in. Next time, we're going to start delving into some of the factions specifically. I believe Falkar is first on our list.
It's part of the Bellringers.
It's part of the Bellringers, yeah.
Excellent.
So we will see you next time.
Okay. Till then, he's Lore Master Matt.
And you are
Faelon Jon.